All right, so good morning, everyone. Glad to see everybody. We've got, again, a lot to get through today, but just to do a quick overview of where we left off at, we ended with the book of Exodus with the climax of God's kavod, his glory, his presence coming to the tabernacle, with Moses anointing the tabernacle and anointing Aaron and his sons. And we get a bigger detail of that account in Leviticus, where we hear about the 7-day boot camp that Aaron and his sons have to go through. And then after that, the tragedy of Nadab and Abihu, who die after doing the wrong procedure when they put their fire pans up to God. So that all occurs in Leviticus. And now Numbers, we are going to finally get on the tail end of the Sinai revelations and move forward to the Israelites proceeding to the Promised Land. So this will be exciting, action-packed book. So we start out in chapter 1, if you want to look at your notes. There's a non-Levite census. So Moses will go, and Aaron, along with the chieftains, goes take a census. And the reason for the census is to try to find recruits that are army ready to fight the Canaanites. So he will do a census of all the non-Levites that are male, 20 ages and up, to be enlisted in the army. And the total comes out to a little over 600,000. And chapter 2 is about the campus formation. And an easier way to illustrate this is to look at your slide on the back of your packets. You'll see a little rectangle, basically a square shape, and this is what the format of the camp looked like. So remember, the Israelites are a mobile camp. They have 600,000+ people that they are moving from location to location, and so they have a very strict procedure of how they're going to go about to get to Canaan. And so they have the tabernacle in the center, that center triangle, as you see. And then on each side will be a group of 3 of the different tribes led by one of the tribesmen. So if you look on the east side, that's where the entrance of the tabernacle is. So Moses and the priests, Aaron and his sons, will live right beside the entrance of the tabernacle. And guarding the entrance is going to be Judah's camp. So the Judah division is going to be on the east side. The Reuben camp is going to be below there with Simeon and Gad. And then on the west side, opposite, in the back of the tabernacle, you have Manasseh, led by Benjamin and Ephraim. And then north, you'll have Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, which is appropriate because the tribe of Dan is also up north when we get to the Israel appropriation of land. So those are the divisions. On top of those divisions of the tribes, to the next chapter, chapter 3 through 4, we're going to get the Levite census, okay? So Levites are not able to be in the military. They are totally beholden to taking care of the tabernacle, doing the upkeep, moving, dislodging the tabernacle whenever they move. And so there's going to be 3 subcategories of the Levite tribe. Okay, if you remember Levi from Genesis, he has 3 sons, okay? He has the son Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And so these 3 sons represent kind of 3 subdivisions within the Levite tribe. And if you see, they're kind of on the inside of that square. So Kohath on the bottom south there, they're in charge of the inside, so they take care of the Holy of Holies and also the holy place, anything interior, all the furnishings, they have to take care of it, move it when they need to move. Gershon, they take care of the exterior stuff on the opposite side of the tabernacle, so anything outside they grab and take hold of. And Merari, they do kind of the structural stuff, so they'll take care of all the poles, the posts, the staffs, the rods, the sockets, all of that foundational material they'll take care of. Okay, so skipping forward now, we're going to chapter 5 through 6. So Moses gives some ground rules for the camp, just purity laws. So we get the first instruction he gives is if anyone has an outbreak of Tazarat, if you guys remember that from Leviticus, Tazarat is kind of leprosy, but it's an umbrella of a lot of different decay of the skin condition that's irregular. So if you have that, if you have discharge, you have to go outside and dwell outside the camp to keep it pure. If anyone defrauds a fellow Israelite, remember what that requires, that guilt offering, that fifth offering. You have to do a guilt offering for that, and that additional 1/5 of the value of whatever you defrauded your fellow Israelite is given the value. Okay? And there's another interesting passage about a ritual mentioned, kind of like the Nazarite ritual that was really elaborate from Leviticus. This is another sort of elaborate ritual if a man accuses his wife of infidelity, okay? So the man will go, assumingly, to the holy place and make a grain offering called the grain offering of jealousy. And then the woman accused will stand before the Lord, and the priest will he'll actually take dirt from the courtyard in the tabernacle and put it in a jar and mix it with this bitter water. And so the accused woman will take this water, and if she's innocent, nothing will happen. If she's guilty, then she is cursed. The scripture says that she'll, have infertility. And the other second interesting thing in this passage is a Nazarite vow. So Nazarites will be mentioned in the book of Kings, but it's also mentioned in who in the book of Judges is a famous Nazarite? Samson, right? Samson with the long hair and the great power. So this explains the Nazarite vow, which is a very holy vow for laymen. It's an opportunity for someone who's not a Levite to kind of be like a lay priest who's able to, almost like a monk, have kind of the sacred vow between them and God to show homage to the Lord. And what this person would do is that they would take a vow to abstain from wine, vinegar, grapes, have no haircut, like Samson, and not go near a dead body, or even a close relative if they pass away. And if they do happen to get a dead body next to them, they have to reset their vow and start all over again. Okay, so after they're done with their vow, they'll take a burnt, a sin, a peace, and a grain offering. And then afterward, what they'll do is they'll shave their hair off, put their hair under the fire of the peace offering, and then remember the token portion of the fat and all that savory material for the Lord, that will be burnt up along with the sin offering, and then the Nazarite will drink the wine, and then they've completed their vow. So we get an explanation of the Nazarite vow in this passage. And afterwards, at the end of the purity ground rules, God will command Moses and Aaron to bless the people of Israel through a special benediction in verses 22 and 27 of chapter 6. All right, chapter 7 and 8. So we're almost there. We're almost on the road to Canaan. So they make final preparations. They're actually about to prepare another ordination ceremony. So remember, the first ordination ceremony in Leviticus focuses on just Aaron and his sons, but this time the whole tribe of Levi is going to be now consecrated and ordained to fulfill the missions and the priestly duties of the Lord. So to celebrate this great occasion, you'll have all the 12 tribes bring these caravans, and they'll bring these expensive material and shekels and gold ladle bulls and all these many sacrifices. So many animals for this. And so if you go to chapter 8, we'll have preparations for it as Moses directs Aaron to light the menorah. And then the rest of chapter 8, you'll see the Levites for the first time inaugurated into the priesthood. They are now able to carry out their holy mission of taking care of the tabernacle and performing sacrifices. Okay, now we're moving on to, at last, the last part, chapter 9 through 10, the Passover and then departure. So to mark their 1-year anniversary from the exodus of Egypt, they finally have their Passover, celebrating their escape from Egypt 1 year later. And so they will celebrate this, and this is a big deal, but some of the men in verses 6 through 13 of chapter 9 will come to Moses like, oh no, like I'm unclean, I have to miss out Passover, what a disappointment. So Moses consults with God, and he said, okay, you know what? We're going to have a makeup day. So there's kind of this makeup Passover. So instead of the first month on the 14th day, the second month on the 14th day, we'll have a makeup session. If someone misses the Passover for a long journey, or if they're become unclean, then this is now the precedent. So the Israelites will now have this extra Passover celebration for those who missed out on the first one. Okay? Next, the Lord directs Moses to make 2 silver trumpets. This is to have 3 purposes. The first one is that it will help communicate to the camp and direct them. So remember, They have all of this going on. They have to have strict marching orders. Judah has to go first, and Reuben, then Ephraim, then Dan, then all the Levites have to carry in the proper order all the furnishings and the tabernacle. So there's this very strict protocol. So the trumpets will help out with that. Second, the trumpets will be used to warn if an enemy comes, if they get ambushed, the trumpets will be used for that to warn against the enemy. And third, to celebrate joyous occasions and festivals. So it'll be inaugurated with these silver trumpets. Okay? So at last, on the 20th day of the second month, the Lord's Kavod will lift up, and they march forward on a 3-day journey into the wilderness of Paran. Okay, so now it's over. Okay, so if you remember, we've been in Mount Sinai ever since Exodus 19. So from Exodus 19 on, from this moment on, we've been hanging out at Mount Sinai, but now we're finally gone. We're heading out. We're ready to go to the Promised Land. So they're off on their journey, and they're going to head to their HQ. So there's a lot of locations to memorize, but the one I want you to remember is Kadesh. Kadesh is where all the main events happen. So Kadesh, if you remember from your outline, you can see a map here on slide 2, kind of an overview of the Middle East. So Kadesh, if you remember from Genesis, that is where Hagar and Ishmael got kicked out, and Abraham and Sarai kicked them out into Hebron. So they went from Hebron into out in the wilderness in Kadesh. So they're towards that wilderness area. So this is just outside of Abraham's capital city that they're marching to, okay? So they're on their way to Kadesh, and they're in this 3-day journey. And on this 3-day journey, they'll have this trope or this reoccurring theme within Numbers where the Israelites complain, they whine, God gets angry, they punishes them, and then, there's a resolution through Moses. So this is going to happen again and again and again throughout Numbers. So the first time it happens on the way to Kadesh, they go to Tiberah, which means to burn. So the people complain. The first time, a fire breaks out in the camp because the Lord's angry. And then the second place is called literally the grave of cravings, or the grave of temptations in Hebrew. And in the second wave, the people are lacking meat and manna. Just if you remember in Sinai, they had that same situation where God gives them quail and manna. But this time, God is just extra mad. So you know what? They're going to get even more of what they want. So instead of just getting a sizable amount of quail, God just buries the camp in like cubits full of this quail. And the people are just so ferocious or so hungry, they eat it and eat it and eat it, and some of them actually die. They gorge themselves to death. So that's why this location is named that, the grave of cravings. Okay? And we get another account of God giving Moses 70 elders to help him with judges. Remember with Jethro kind of advised Moses to have 70 people to help with the smaller disputes. Here, God again is giving him 70 elders to help lead Moses with these different camps. So he elects 70 leaders. And then last, before we get to Kadesh, we have the story of Miriam's curse. So they arrive at a place called Hazeroth, and Moses' siblings are like, hey, we're mad at you because you married a Cushite. Which is kind of strange because Zipporah, remember the Midianite Zipporah who he married when Moses was a fugitive, Jethro's daughter, she might be a Cushite. We're not really sure why this complaint happens. Moses might have remarried another Cushite because the kingdom of Cush in the ancient world is actually closer to Egypt and Africa. So perhaps Moses remarried again, and their siblings are mad and denounce him. So God is angered of this, and Miriam is struck with leprosy. And then Aaron's pleading, help me, my sister, you can't let this stand. So Moses returns to God and says, please lift this curse. And then Moses will proceed to have his plea heeded. And, God instructs her to stay out of the camp for 7 days and then come back. And after the 7 days are over, Miriam is healed, and they are off to Kadesh. Okay, so now they're at Kadesh. They're right outside of Hebron, and now this is where the action starts to happen, where a lot of the iconic stories of Numbers occur. So they're at Kadesh. Moses has these chieftains come to him, advising him, saying, hey, it would be a great idea, instead of just having 600,000 people just kind of storm the area, let's kind of get some intel. Let's go scout out and see what the land's like. Let's get a lay of the enemies, kind of the layout, see where the best approach for attack is, et cetera, et cetera. So Moses agrees, and so he sends 12 people from each tribe to go in this spy task force that he assembles. 2 of them, which are the most significant of this, that are chosen, are Caleb and Joshua. Another interesting fact, side note, so we get the origin explanation of how Joshua got his name. So in Hebrew, Joshua's name is actually Hosea. So Hosea in Hebrew means salvation. And Moses adds the prefix Yah. So like Elijah, God, Yahweh, Yahweh is my God is what Elijah means. But Yah in front of Hosea is Yahweh is salvation. So that is how Joshua gets his name. And then Yeshua, Jesus' name, that is a variation of Joshua, meaning the same thing. So interesting fact for you. Okay, so on to the story. So the spies are out. They get a lay of the land. They travel. They look around. You can see the spy route up in your map. They go up towards Hebron. They pass by. They circle around all the way up to the Sea of Galilee, up the Jordan. And they come across this branch at some point, and this branch has just a cluster of grapes and pomegranates, figs, and they're like, oh, this will be great. Let's take this back to Moses. And so the site that they find these grapes are called the Wadi Eskul. So Wadi is Arabic, meaning stream, and Eskul is cluster. So it's like the cluster they found, or the stream they found the cluster of grapes in. So that's a location mentioned in the Bible. So they made their intel. After 40 days, they come back to Moses and Aaron, report what they did, and they're like, yeah, it's a great land. We're excited. There's so much here, so much prosperity of the land. But man, these people are giants. They have these people called the Anakites, which another name of them is the Nephilim. So the Nephilim, remember, if you go all the way back to Genesis 6, we had that really strange verse talking about these Nephilims, the origins of these people. And these are the Nephilims alluded to all the way back in Genesis. And so there's just these very intimidating people of the land that are just going to be able to crush the Israelites. So most of the spies are fearful, but Caleb and Joshua step up. They're like, why are you guys being negative Nancy? Like, let's go. And, God has done so much for us. He's led us out of Egypt. He's done all these great miracles. Let's just go out there and trust that God is going to see us through victory. So they hear about that. Rumors start spilling out. So remember, this is kind of a private conversation between Moses and the spies, but the spies will kind of leak into the community, and sooner than later, the whole community hears this conversation and is just so distraught. They're like, oh my gosh, like these giants are going to tear us apart. Like, why did Moses do this? Why can't we just go back to Egypt where we had security? And so people are just getting in a ruckus, and Moses and Aaron are falling their faces. Joshua and Caleb are tearing their clothes, and Joshua and Caleb just step up, and they're like giving this impassioned plea for Israel to believe in their God, to trust in Yahweh. And of course, they're met with applause and thunderous, and they're just, oh, yay, let's do this. No, of course that doesn't happen, right? So everyone, they start picking up their stones, and they want to stone Joshua and Caleb. They're just really mad. They want to go back to Egypt, and so they're rebelling. And so the kavod of God just comes down and interferes, and the Lord's kavod comes over. God talks to Moses, and he's like, you know what? I am so angry at these people. I'm just going to annihilate all these Israelites and just start all over. Moses, I'm just going to get you into the promised land, and these guys are just going to get killed. But Moses is like, no, Lord, please don't. And they negotiate, and after some negotiation, they come up with a compromise. They're like, all right, so I'm not going to completely annihilate these people, but these people are not going to see the promised land. They did not have the faith in me that was required, so they're going to wander the desert for 40 years and die off until every single one of them die, until it's just the next generation. So their children will maintain the promise, but they themselves will never see the promised land. So with this compromise, they now establish, they hear the news of this, The Israelites are upset. They're just sad. They're like, oh my gosh, why didn't we listen to God? And so they get a little ahead of themselves. They're really excited. They're like, you know what? We're going to do a complete 180. We're just going to go in there guns blazing and take out Hebron. So they go to that spy route up north, and they just make a beeline up there. They don't do anything. They don't take their marching orders. They don't take the tabernacle. God is not with them. They're just going up there and just going to take out these giants. And Moses warns them, like, no, God is not going to be with you. So they ignore Moses. They go up there anyways without the tabernacle, and they just get beaten, okay? They get pummeled, completely defeated, and they have to go back and retreat back to Kadesh. So they were not able to go to the promised land, just like God had promised. Okay, so the narrative is going to take a little break, and chapter 15, we get exposition of God telling the Israelites what they should do once they enter the promised land. So a little bit more of these rules. I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm just going to highlight a few. Remember Leviticus, where I told you that the grain offering is accompanied with sin and peace offerings? This is where we get that information from. So this is where we get the first mention of grain offerings having to go hand in hand with the sin and the burnt offerings. And the reason for this is that it simulates a full meal. You'd have your meat, you'd have your grain, and so God requires the same for himself. So that's why it goes hand in hand. The bread, that delicious Canaanite bread, the first ones of those, they're going to go to God. That's mentioned in there. There's this anecdotal story of this wood gathering wood on the Sabbath. God judges a man, and he's stoned to death outside the camp. So just a reminder of how serious the Sabbath is. And then lastly, God makes this interesting command to have these blue fringes on the edge of your garment, on the corner of your garment. And that is, I assume that this was maybe expensive material, rare material. And it was just a reminder of the Israelites to be holy and observant to the Lord. So they have this little tasseled reminder of that. Okay. All right. Chapter 16, we're back into the story. So we're back at Kadesh. Morale is at an all-time low. The people have just been defeated at Hormah, meaning destruction. So people are just really upset. They're really getting angered at Moses' leadership. And so this Levite named Korah emerges among them, and he rallies these three Reubenites named Dathan, Abiram, and On. And they rise up against Moses. And they recruit about 250 other Israelites and basically confront Moses and tell him that, hey, we're all chosen. We're all God's people. We're all chosen by God. We all have the same spirit. What makes you so special, Moses? What makes you kind of the big shot around these parts? So Moses is upset. He's very humble, but calmly, he's like, okay, you know what? Let's do this. Let's make a challenge for you guys. What I'll do is we'll go out the next morning. Aaron and his sons will bring their fire pans. You and your boys, your 250, will bring out their fire pans, and we're going to see, what the God's kavod is going to choose to be the true leaders representing God. So Korah accepts this challenge, but Dathan and Abiram, the Reubenites that are the co-conspirators, they do not. Okay, so that's going to be important later on. Okay, so the next morning comes, everyone's gathered at the tabernacle waiting for this big showdown in the courtyard to see who God is going to pick to be the leader of their camp. So the Israelites are gathered around, and then God out of nowhere confronts the people and speaks to them and warns them, saying that to get away from the south camp, the Reubenite camp, because Dathan and Abiram are about to be judged. So God calls Moses to go outside the tabernacle, go to the south camp, the Reubenite camp, to confront Dathan and Abiram, who were too cowardly to come to the showdown. And after Moses admonishes them, the scripture says that Dathan and Abiram get swallowed up. So the ground goes underneath them and then gets swallowed up underneath. The Bible describes it as they're going down, eaten alive by Sheol. The place of the dead in Hebrew. So they are no more, and people are just frightened. They're like, oh my gosh, this Moses guy is serious. And afterwards, kavod comes down, and just like Aaron's two eldest sons, they get burnt up. The rebels, the 250 of them, get burnt up and charred and drop their fire pans. All right, chapter 17 continues on the aftermath of this event. So Eleazar gets the the best job. He's instructed to go out and get the copper pan leftovers from these charred remains of these rebels. And because they've been stricken by God's kavod, they become holy. So these pans become holy, and they'll actually be molded into the altar, the sacrificial altar. So Eleazar will do that. You would think that after all of this, that people would start listening to Moses. He's been performing all these miracles. He's been stomping out all this rebellion, but the people are actually upset. So they are mad. They are mad that this happened to Korah, and they are running and chasing Aaron and Moses into the tabernacle, ready to overturn them. And then God is just outraged. He comes down on his kavod, and in his anger, God will send this plague. So this plague falls down in the center of the tabernacle, and it'll spread out. And this spread is just killing people. It's spreading out and killing all these Israelites. And Moses is like, Aaron, quickly, get your fire pan and make expiation, make atonement for these people. So he grabs his fire pan, goes to where the outbreak is, and then right where he reaches the scene of the outbreak, it ceases. So the outbreak will just magically vanish, but not afterward. We still get the most casualties we've had of Israelites so far. So 14,700 Israelites still die from this great plague that spread throughout the camp. Okay, and this is not the last time this is going to happen. So this plague is going to happen again later on in our story. So keep an eye on that. All right, chapters 17, 16 through 27. This is kind of like another side story explaining how Aaron's rod gets to be in the Ark of the Covenant. Aaron's rod is in there because Moses will instruct 12 chieftains to take their staff, write their name, take their staff, put it in the Ark of the Covenant. The next morning he goes out. He notices that Aaron's staff is like rising up. It's sprouting. In fact, not only is it sprouting up, it has blossoms and almonds growing off of it. And so this is just a symbolic way to show that Aaron is indeed the chosen person of God. So this is kind of like a symbolic gesture showing that Aaron is in fact the one representing God. So we get that little side story. Chapters 18 through 19, we get kind of more priesthood instructions to Aaron. There's going to be this tithe, basically saying that a tenth of all their possessions are going to be given to Aaron as a donation to the sanctuary. We're going to go deeper into this in Deuteronomy, but just kind of keep that in the back of your head. This tithe, this law of this tithe is going to be important later on, and I'll mention it again next book. The next is this other strange ritual. It's called the ritual of the red cow. Okay, so think of impurity. If you're unclean, if you birth a child, you got to go, go do your ritual. Some rituals you only need to be washed up and then leave the camp, come back after sunset, and then you're good. But some cases, especially with dead bodies, they need an extra bit of oomph to their purification. So think of most impurities of being kind of like hand sanitizer. Well, sometimes you need bleach. And so this red cow ritual, this is a bleach to get rid of these impurities having to do with dead bodies. So if a person comes near a dead body, they're going to have to do a special task. They're going to have to get a red cow, get Eleazar to do a burnt offering of this cow, and then Eleazar will, like the sin offering, will take the blood, sprinkle it 7 times on the sacrificial altar, and then burn it completely. Burn the burnt offering with this hyssop, cedar, red dye, all these nice expensive fragrances. And then these ashes that are going to be burnt is going to be used to bathe the person that's touched the dead body. So the person is going to have to quarantine for 7 days, and on the 3rd and the 7th day, they're going to have to be washed with this ashes of this red cow. And if they don't, they're going to get exiled, okay? All right, so back to the story. So chapter 20 is going to go over the invasion of the Transjordan. So for the rest of Numbers, we're going to go into the story of how Moses actually goes and begins the initial invasion of the Transjordan. If you look at your map, they're going to go to the east, going around the Dead Sea through Moab. If you remember the book of Ruth, you can remember that's the route that Ruth and Naomi go on. And then they'll go on the eastern side of the Transjordan River. And so Moses is going to confront all of these different Canaanite tribes. And a lot of people think that, Joshua is, the battle-hardened leader, but actually Moses, old man Moses actually gets in on the action towards the tail end of Numbers. So this is his story. Okay, so the Korah rebellion, the punishment with the spies and rebelling against God. Remember that 40-year punishment? Deuteronomy tells you the locations, but just know that they make a big circle for 40 years, but eventually they're going to come at the same place, Kadesh. So they're all going to end up at Kadesh. So 40 years of wandering, they die, and then they reach Kadesh, and now we're resuming our story. So this is 40 years later, so we're fast-forwarding 40 years later. Everyone is dead except Aaron and his Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, and of course Caleb and Joshua. But on the 40th day, on the first moon of the 40th year, as it ends, Miriam dies. Okay, so Miriam dies at the beginning of chapter 20. And Numbers will go back to Exodus 17, verses 1 through 7. If you guys remember from that story, you get the story of the Waters of Mariba. So that story where the Israelites get upset, they're thirsty, they want water, they complain, and Moses will go take his rod and go to Mount Sinai, and near a rock near Mount Sinai, he hits it, and then it opens up the spring water. If you remember that story, it's retold here, but the difference is in this retelling, the ending explains why Moses and Aaron are going to be disqualified for the promised land. So because they disobeyed or they didn't do the proper way that God wanted to do, they got prideful, they are now punished, and they're going to join the 40 that die off. They're going to live a little bit longer, but they're not going to be able to see the promised land that God promised the Israelites. So they are disqualified. Later in chapter 20, okay, so they're on their march, they're ready, they're leaving Kadesh, and they're going eastward to Edom. Okay, remember Edom? Who is Edom? Who remembers Edom? Where does that tribe come from? Esau's tribe, right? Esau's tribe. So that is blocking Arabia, and they want to go through Edom to get to a commercial highway, a commercial trading route in the ancient world called the King's Highway. So they want to try to make this, easy to go path. But the king of Edom's like, no, you guys, I don't want 600,000 people going through my place and eating all my stuff and taking my resources. So they block him. They're like, darn it, okay, well, I guess we'll just go, we'll just kind of scale up Edom. Okay, so they get kicked out. They're not able to go through Edom. They have to kind of skirt along the ridge of the valleys. And as they are skirting through the valley, they come upon this mount called Mount Hor. And God will tell them, okay, stop, guys. We're stopping at this mountain. This is where Aaron's going to die. So go up. Moses, Aaron, and Eleazar are told to go up to this mountain. There, Aaron will have his vestments stripped, his high priestly vestments, his uniform, his priest clothes that we learned about in Exodus is taken away, and now it's going to be put on Eleazar. And as soon as that happens, Aaron will pass away. So he dies up there. Eleazar is now the successor to Aaron. And then the whole community will mourn for 30 days. We get another side story, again, with this wave of complaints that happened that we talked about. So this happens again. The people complain about a lack of bread and water on the way through Edom, the skirting Edom, and God will send out these serpents called seraphs, which could mean like flaming serpents or poisonous serpents, something like that. And these are just deadly vipers that bite the people, killing them. Moses then talks to God and say, oh God, how can we prevent this? And so God will tell Moses to put this seraph statue or like this icon on a standard or like a banner or a pole, whatever you want to call it, and to lift it up, and whoever sees this figure is going to be healed. So we get an interesting side story of that. So on to the main story. So they're going up through Edom, going towards the Dead Sea, and then they're going to go to the Aram region, and they face off this king. And so this is going to be their first or their second attack of Hormah. The first one, remember, it ended in failure right after they failed to adhere to Caleb and Joshua. So now they're fighting again at Hormah, but this time They say that, we'll prescribe the land. We're going to commit, it's a Hebrew word, harem, and utterly destroy these lands. And so they do, and God heeds them, and then Israelites will get their first victory. So this is their first victory into the Transjordan invasion. So they defeat this king, and they move further. And so they're going through all these different locations. The next location I want you to know, if you look at the close-up, the next slide on the bottom of your notes, you'll see like a close-up of this invasion, okay? So one way to think of Israel and Palestine, an easy way to remember it, okay? If you want the layout of the land, you have a circle. Think of a circle in your mind. That's the Sea of Galilee. That's where Jesus did his ministry. That's near Capernaum, Nazareth. All of that is up here. And then you have this little stream. That stream is called the Jordan River, and that stream's going to end at the Dead Sea. Okay, so you have kind of North Israel up near the Sea of Galilee, and then you have South Israel near the Dead Sea. That's where Bethlehem, Jerusalem. So that's an easy way if you ever need to memorize your geography of Israel. So they're at the Dead Sea. They're coming around. If you see a close-up there, they're going through Moab, and they get to the end of the Dead Sea. There's a halfway point of the Dead Sea called the River of Arnon. So the River Arnon to the Jabbok River, if you guys see on your on the back of your packet, it's like halfway through Jordan. So this region is ruled by one person named Sihon. So this King Sihon, he is an Amorite king that rules this region from that river to that river. And he is going to confront Moses. Moses goes to him just like the Edomite king. And he's just like, hey, I just want to go through the king's highway. I want to go through that commercial trading route, that nice easy path to get to the Jordan River. Sihon is like, no, I refuse. But not only does he refuse, he actually goes out and fights Moses. So Moses is camped out near Arnon, and a little bit north of that, they go to this wilderness called Jahaz. So Jahaz, when they reach Jahaz, Sihon and his army will meet them, and that they're now in their second battle in the Transjordan invasion. And they battle Sihon and ends up defeating him decisively. So they defeat them, and not only is this victory just great that they get safe passage, but they're actually going to get their land. So this is the first time Israelites are going to actually conquer land, and they're going to get his whole kingdom from the Jabbok River to the Arnon River. Okay, and later on we're going to find out Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben are actually going to get these lands. Okay. So they make their first victory, they're pumped, God is with them. So you know what, they're gonna keep this momentum up. They're gonna actually go north. They're gonna go north past the Jabbok River, past the Sea of Galilee, all the way up north near towards Syria, and where Damascus is, called Bashan. So anything above the Jabbok River is called Bashan. Okay? That region is also ruled by another Amorite king named Og. So the same thing happens. Og refuses. They pursue the Israelites in Adrai, that's circled near the King's Highway. They fight them there, and another defeat or another victory for the Israelites. So Og is defeated. So the Israelites are on a roll. They now rule this whole region north of Mount Hermon, all the way for the Jabbok River, all the way to the Arnon River. They have all of this land now. And man, they're celebrating. They take all this land, and then once they defeat the inhabitants, they go back south, and they're going to go back towards the north of the Dead Sea. If you see that circle, the Plains of Moab, they're going to go and camp there. And they're going to camp at this place called Shittim, right off of the plains of Moab. And the story's going to pause, okay? So the story pauses, and now you can think of like meanwhile, end scene, and then meanwhile, cut to the bad guys. So there's this other king, the King of Moab. Remember, Moab is like right in that area. That's where they're camping out. And so Balak is the king that they have not defeated. They haven't fought this king yet. But he's seen his neighbors. He knows Sihon, he knows Og, and he's like, oh my gosh, these Israelites they're wreaking havoc. They're ruling this region. God is blessing them. Like, man, how do I stand a chance against these people? So he's like, I got an idea. I'm going to get the best of the best prophet to come down, and I'm going to get them to curse these people so I can finally beat them in battle and do what Og and Sihon couldn't. So he goes, he gets his henchmen, he gets these Midianites. So remember, back on the other map, Media is below Edom in Arabia. So he recruits these people, I guess his ally in Midian, and they recruit these elders to come up and go all the way to Pethor. Pethor is super north, past Damascus, all the way up in North Syria. And so he's recruiting the best of the best, making this really big journey all the way up there to recruit this prophet named Balaam, okay? So he's going to go to this region, get this prophet named Balaam. The 70 elders come, and Balaam's like, okay, well, let me do this for you. Let me, pray about it. Let me talk to God, and you guys stay the night. So they spend the night. They come back to Balaam. God says, no, this is my blessed people. You can't curse them. And so Balaam's like, sorry, I can't do anything. Sorry, guys. So the elders leave disappointedly, but Balak is not done yet. He's like, okay, no, I'm going to get you even more riches. I'm going to get you all the gold I can. I'm going to get even more diplomats to come to you and convince you. So they do. And Balaam's like, you know what? I can have all the riches in the world, but if God says, I can't say anything he doesn't put in my mouth. So he spends the night, but this time God tells him, okay, you know what, go with these people, but you're only going to be able to do what I tell you to do. So Balaam listens. Balaam goes with the elders, and then we get this interesting story within a story. We're on the way to Balak. He's riding his donkey, and they're in this road, and then suddenly this angel with a sword comes out. And the donkey's like fearful. It's like getting out of the way. It's veering left off the road. But for whatever reason, Balaam can't see this angel. Only the donkey can. So Balaam is mad. He hits the donkey 3 times. And then God will open this donkey's mouth and just say, like, why are you beating me? Why are you doing this? And Balaam is like, you're making a fool out of me. And he gets mad, and then suddenly God will take the veil off of his eyes, and then he sees the angel in front of him. He's like, oh my gosh, there's an angel. So he goes down on the ground, and the angel will admonish him, saying, why didn't you listen to your donkey? It was only trying to protect you. And so he just reminds him to continue his journey with the elders, but just do only as God instructs, okay? So we're getting to the end of the Balaam story. So they go, he meets up with Balak at the Moabite border. And then they meet up. They have this great feast. He kind of wine and dines Balaam, and he sets them off to this heights right over the Israelite camp, where they can actually see them camp over the Plains of Moab. And he'll take them to this location, tell them to build 7 altars and sacrifices, and then he's going to go in solidarity and see what God tells him to say. And so he does that. But what happens? Instead of cursing, he does what? He blesses the Israelites. And Balak's like, oh my gosh, how can you do this? Okay, let's try this again. Let's go to this location. Okay, no, same thing happens. Let's go to this location. So he goes to all these different locations, but the same result happens, that he's blessing the Israelites instead of cursing him. So Balak just throws up his hands. He's like, oh no, this didn't work out at all. Just leave, and I'm not giving you a penny. So Balak is upset, and Balaam will do this kind of one last prophecy. And he'll say that Israelites aren't even going to be victorious, but they're going to conquer not just Moab, but the whole region is going to be under their footstool. So Balaam is with that. He goes and he leaves back to his homeland. And that's kind of ends that little short story of Balak and Balaam. Okay, so back to the Israelite camp. So in the Israel camp, we are chapter 25 to 26. Talks about how the people are happy. They've defeated Og, they've defeated Sihon, and the soldiers get a little crazy. They mingle with the local Moabite women, and they're worshiping their God. They're engaging in the temple prostitution, things like that. And the Lord is just upset. He brings down his plague. The people in the tabernacle are, crying. They're mourning. They're like, why, God? Why are they doing this? And then this guy named Zimri, who is like the least aware chieftain of all time, he comes, and while people are mourning for all these people, he goes, he takes this temple prostitute, which happens to be a Midianite priest's daughter named Cosby, and takes him into their tent, And then Phinehas, remember Phinehas, Eleazar's son's grown up now 40 years later. And so Phinehas is upset and he's just angry. He takes a spear, he just barges into Zimri's tent. And when they're caught in the act, he just impales the chieftain and this temple prostitute, and their stomachs are impaled and the spears on the ground, killing both of them. And for some reason, this makes atonement for Israel. So God is happy. The plague ends. God rewards Phinehas with a pact of friendship because he was able to wipe out the evil among them. And then we'll get another chapter in chapter 31. This actually continues. So it's interesting. It kind of skips forward. You'll have kind of this other thread of story, but the thread of the worship at Baal Peor ends in chapter 31. So if you fast forward to chapter 31, it picks up where 25:17 leaves off. Moses recruits 1,000 men to take vengeance on the Midianites for seducing the men of Israel. And Phinehas will lead this group of 12,000. They're going to recruit 1,000 people from each tribe. And they're going to go storm Midian. They basically defeat all the kings. They seize, they get plunder. They get the women, the children. They bring them all to Moses. And Moses is actually mad because he's like, no, why didn't you? You're supposed to execute the women because the women were the seducers. So he gets mad. And then so they basically, the rest of chapter 31 just tells this precedence of how wartime rituals need to happen. We don't have time to go into it, but if you want to go deeper into that, it's how to divide the plunder, what rituals need to happen after a battle's ensued. So we get that. So rewind back, we're in chapter 27. There's a case of the daughters of Zelophehad. It's basically a court case. It's in 27 and 36. Basically, to summarize it, these women have a dad named Zelophehad, and he dies during the 40-day wandering, and he doesn't have any sons to inherit land into the promised land. So the women are like, oh my gosh, my dad's going to be forgotten. How's his name going to be forgotten? Moses goes to God. God tells them that basically the women can't inherit the land. So women do have the right to inherit their father's land. And chapter 36, the Manasseh comes and what happens if the women marry off to the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Ephraim? Ephraim's going to get our land then. It's going to get absorbed from Manasseh's tribe. So the Lord makes this precedent that the women can only marry within the Manasseh tribe. So that's kind of that legal precedent taken care of. All right, so 27, we have the commission of Joshua and Eleazar. They're now officially the new leaders because Moses is about to die and he knows he can't go into the promised land across the Jordan. 28 through 29, we get the calendar and the sacrificial offerings. 30, we get an explanation on vows. And then 32, it ends with a story with Reuben, Gad, come to Moses before they cross the Jordan because they're about to cross the Jordan. They're going to do the invasion of Jericho. But before that, they talk to Moses. They're like, hey, Moses, we have all these flocks. We have a lot of flocks. But man, look at this land around the Jabbok River or the Arnon River. Man, wouldn't it be great just to settle here? And Moses is mad. He's like, no, you guys, you've come this far. You're going to help your brothers. You're going to help conquer Jericho and Israel. So the tribes are like, okay, we're going to just build settlements. We're going to, put our family, our kids there. And after that, we're going to be your frontline soldiers. So Moses accepts this. And then afterwards, Manasseh will capture Galilee. If you remember Galilee, that's where Jacob and Laban made their pact. That's where Galilee is. So they conquered that. Manasseh and Reuben, they will take out some of the natives that are still there. And we get that story at the tail end of chapter 32. Okay, now we're wrapping up. You get the border assignments for Israel in chapter 33 through 34. You get an overview. Well, 33, you get an overview of the whole journey. If you forgot locations or places or order, chapter 33 will help you review that. And the rest is talking about the borders within Israel. Chapter 35 is going to be about Levite cities. Remember, Levites don't have land, so they get these 48 specialized cities. And within those cities, 6 of them are going to be refuge cities for people that are killed unintentionally. We're going to get more into this in Deuteronomy, but if, there's no law enforcement, so if someone kills one of your family members, it's up to the family to go get a blood avenger to kill that killer. So if someone is innocent of manslaughter or they did it unintentionally, the elders will protect them, and they will go to these 3 special cities, okay? And that wraps up the book of Numbers. I know that's a lot, but we're kind of at the precipice of an exciting moment where where the Israelites will cross over to Jericho and defeat them. Before this happens, we will have 3 famous speeches of Moses on the Plains of Moab. That is what the book of Deuteronomy covers. And after that, Moses will die, leaving Joshua in charge, and then they will charge into Jericho and begin the invasion of Israel, okay? And that brings us to the end of Numbers. I'll pray us out, and we'll be dismissed. Father, as we look into your story of how Moses came with faithlessness, Lord, that they came not knowing what to expect, with people not believing after all of their miracles, after all that you've done to them, Lord. But Father, you were still faithful. You still saw them out to victory. So Lord, I pray that we can learn lessons from this book, that we can go and turn to Deuteronomy and see the Deuteronomic laws that Moses lays down as a precedent for those living in Canaan. Father, I pray that we are diligent in our study and our understanding of these laws and see how important they are in application to us today. So Father, we are so excited as we wrap up, beginning the tail end of the books of Moses. And Father, pray that we continue to study hard and really get a deeper understanding of your word and understanding this proper context. And so we pray all this in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Thank y'all.